to another episode of CMN Chats. My name is Alexis, a senior PRAD major, as well as a digital content assistant within the College of Communication. And I'm very excited to bring you guys another episode of CMN Chats with our guest, Joshua Smyser-DeLeon. Hi, Joshua.
Hey, thanks for having me today. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, of course. Oh my gosh. Like I said before we started recording, just really appreciated, being asked to be on. So thanks for having me again.
Of course. Well, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, quick hits. I'm a Chicago-born Boricua with a strong passion for public service, Puerto Rican culture, storytelling. For people listening that are hearing the term Boricua for the first time, that's actually a term we Puerto Ricans use to describe ourselves. It acknowledges our connection to our indigenous ancestors and the original name of Puerto Rico, which was Borinquen. So just a fun little Puerto Rican history lesson there. I know we're going to talk about my DePaul experience, but I feel like I have deep roots in Chicago, but my roots are even deeper when it comes to the connections that I have to DePaul University. My dad was in the Vincentian Seminary, ended up deciding not to go that route or else I would not be here. Ended up meeting my mother, who's also a DePaul alum. The Vincentians actually gave my dad a roof over his head when he was trying to find a home. Ended up working at DePaul. My parents got married at St. Vincent de Paul. I myself am a double demon, got my bachelor's degree in industrial organizational psychology, then a master's degree in PR and advertising. It's at this university that I actually met my wife, and we got married at DePaul University. She's also a DePaul alum, and I used to work at DePaul. So when you hear the term bleed blue, that is me through and through. So we got nothing but love for the university.
That's such an incredible story. I had no idea. It's so special. I literally bleed blue. Yeah, that blue demon that runs through you guys is blood in your family. But you mentioned you being a double demon, but I want to talk to you more specifically about the master's program, the PRAD program that you were a part of.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about why you chose to continue your education at DePaul and specifically within the College of Communication in the PRAD program.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it really comes down to I was in a point in my life where I realized a lot of the roles that I was being hired for or being placed in as roles shifted within an organization that I'd worked for, I increasingly found myself in more of a communications role. And as I mentioned earlier, I graduated initially with my undergrad with a bachelor's degree in industrial organizational psychology, which is really just about applying psychology to business. So a lot of it really comes down to like consulting, human resources. I really like meeting people. I like figuring out how to improve employee-employer relations. And I got to do a lot of that stuff after graduation. But a lot of the things I ended up developing passions for hovered around or were directly tied to the communication space. So when I saw the opportunity to work at DePaul University as a Latinx outreach coordinator, I jumped at that opportunity. And it was through my employment at DePaul University as a benefit of being an employee there, I could actually get my master's degree paid for. So I ended up looking and really reflecting on, what do I want the next chapter of my professional career to be? So I looked at what I had done, what I'd like to do, and I saw this bridge, this imaginary bridge almost forming where the stars aligned. And I said to myself, like, okay, I think communications is the way to go here. This is the right professional path for me. And I have to give credit to my wife because she was a College of Communications graduate. And so she practices public relations in her role today. And I really got to pick her brain in addition to other staff and faculty at the College of Communications, but really have to credit my partner for answering those tougher questions and giving me some honest feedback on, based off of my experience, do you think that this is a good path for me? I'm really feeling a tie to this, a call to this. And after just kind of, again, just talking to a lot of my support system, my network, and looking at what I've done and where I want to go, the College of Communications seemed like a no-brainer. So ended up signing up for the PR and advertising program. Decided to start out slow, take a couple of classes, feel out the classroom, my cohort, and even the faculty that I'd be engaging with from one week to the next. And I was increasingly impressed with each professor I met. So again, it was a no-brainer. There was lots of factors involved, but if I had to like kind of whittle it down to one thing, it really came down to reassessing what was going to be the most fulfilling way forward in my professional career, and the PRAD program provided that.
Yeah, as I mentioned in my intro, I'm a PRAD major right now, and all of the things that you saw within that program are what I see even within the undergrad program, incredible faculty, coursework, and how that can help you with your career goals. So I definitely would agree with you on those sentiments. Yeah. But you know, more to the curriculum, like what sort of classes did you take? What was kind of your favorite part of the program?
Yeah, so I took a number of courses that were focused more on the public relations side of things. A couple of the classes I really enjoyed. Well, first off, let me say there wasn't a class that I didn't enjoy. But specifically, I can point to 3 courses I really enjoyed. One was Business Skills and Communications with Matt Regis. That really pushed me to think about the corporate side of communications. So, you know, if you hear about a company giving an earnings call, there's a lot of lingo that's involved there. There's a lot of communications that can go around with articulating, you know, what are the highs, what are the challenges that a company is facing from one quarter to the next. When I started that class, I'd listened to an earnings call and I felt like I was more confused after it than I was going into it. But having those moments with Matt Regis to kind of pick his brain on the ins and outs of like the wider business world and how communication fits into that, that was an amazing experience. And part of that course was also to develop a case study for the Page Society competition. And there's a longer, I don't want to go in like the too many details on that, but we essentially, myself and 4 other peers of mine put together a case study on the Wayfair walkout and the larger storyline of employee activism. Now, we didn't get placed in that competition, but the experience, just putting our hats in the ring for consideration, and putting a case study at that size and at that level together is not something I think I necessarily thought I was prepared to do until, you know, Matt provided that guidance and, you know, was dropping truth bombs and knowledge on us from one week to the next in such an engaging way that it really made me feel more confident in my abilities transitioning from being a student at DePaul to then entering into corporate PR. Another course I really enjoyed was with Ron Culp. This, unfortunately, I didn't get to take this in person. Ended up taking this course during the winter intersession and took it online. But it was about diverse voices and the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the public relations space. So he introduced us to this book that's called Diverse Voices, and it's a compilation of different testimonials from BIPOC public relations pros talking about their experiences. You know, what were the challenges they faced? What were the wins that they experienced? And, you know, what's some advice that they would be able to impart into aspiring BIPOC PR pros that are going to be entering into this space? That was a really cool thing to see because unfortunately, the public relations advertising space is dominated by white people, and, you know, great people in that field. I've worked with a lot of amazing PR pros, but when I look around a table and I don't see people like me, or if I'm trying to explore if this career path is the one for me, and I don't see someone I can relate to either culturally or identity wise, you know, that can really make or break whether or not, you know, our profession gets some of the, you know, the cream of the crop, the most talented people with creative ideas. We lose out on an entire demographic if we don't consider the wider impact of creating a diverse, equitable, and inclusive space. And having that course with Ron was great because we actually got to interview people of color that were in the PR space and like high level C-suite level people. So I got to pick the brains of people from companies like General Motors. And I don't know that I would have had that opportunity if it wasn't for taking that course. Last one I'll throw out there I took a great class on crisis comms, and my gosh, it was so fun going from one week to the next, and basically hearing how professors messed up, how companies messed up, how they navigated different like crisis scenarios. And I should also say, I talked about Matt, I talked about Ron. The professor for that crisis comms class was actually Jim Motzer. He's retired now, so for anybody listening to this, you missed out because he was an amazing professor. But I ended up liking that course so much that I ended up, as I was deciding, do I want to go after I graduated in the nonprofit field? Do I want to go into the agency space? Jim actually offered a study abroad course to New York City. I mean, study abroad, you're still in the United States, but it was to New York City. And we basically traveled the city, meeting with different ad agencies, PR agencies. So I got to meet with some amazing people in the Big Apple and got to really step foot into the agencies we had only heard about on paper or in discussions in the classroom. So to have those one-on-one or those group conversations with PR and advertising pros at such a rapid clip, it allowed me to create a better map of, what did I like, what I didn't like. And believe me, there was agencies that we went to and I thought, I don't really feel like my values are reflected in this agency. I don't really feel like y'all are representing the best clients. I'm not really feeling this. So it allowed me to have it allowed me to create a more educated decision on where I wanted to go post-grad. So if I had to point to certain classes, definitely those courses with Jim, Matt, and Ron.
That's really incredible. And those sound like amazing courses, and that helped you to grow and learn in the classroom and outside of the classroom, having that hands-on experience, which I value my PRAD education. But speaking a little bit more onto the College of Communication, you are part of the new Young Advisory Board. Would you like to tell us about that and kind of why you want to be a part of it?
Sure. And just to preface my answer, we're still in the infancy stages of building this out. So as of right now, we have our charter, we have our group together. So the quick kind of elevator pitch is, the Young Professionals Advisory Board. It's a diverse group of socially responsible emerging leaders in communications who essentially are act as ambassadors of DePaul's College of Communications. And that's not just in our professional lives, that's also in our personal lives. So we really want to figure out a way for us as a group, how can we best support the university in developing students' readiness to engage with and thrive in the next chapter of their lives post-graduation. And currently we have 18 different and diverse, amazing young professionals that make up the board. And of course, understanding that, we're all professionals in an ever-changing world, especially during the pandemic. Like I said before, we're still in the beginning stages of brainstorming how to best support the College of Communication and its students moving forward. But really excited to be a co-chair of this. It's a 2-year term that I'm on for. So talk about creating something from the ground up. It's a thrilling experience, and just happy to be along for the ride.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know it's in the really early stages, so I appreciate you sharing more about that. But
yeah, you'll have to get my co-chair Emma on the show in the future once we have a bit more concrete steps. Quick plug for my co-leader there.
I want to take a step outside of your beloved and my beloved DePaul University that we are both very attached. You currently work at Zeno Group. Would you tell us about the company and your role there?
Yeah, so Zeno Group is a public relations agency. They have locations all around the world. They are originally started out as like the conflict agency under the Edelman umbrella. And what I mean by that is, let's say Edelman had a client that was in, let's say, the food industry. right? Let's say they have a client like Mars Candy. Well, if Hershey puts out a request for proposal to see, what agency would like to take on their work, well, it would be a conflict of interest for Edelman to represent Mars and Hershey simultaneously. So Zeno Group was formed, and that's where an RFP for a company like Hershey would be submitted. That would be submitted through Zeno, and if Zeno got that client, that way there's no conflict. You have two separate agencies trying to advocate as best as possible and work as strongly as possible to meet the goals and the KPIs for the companies they represent. It's a great agency to work for. Full disclosure, when I started in the PRAD program, I was very hesitant. I know I've touched on this a little bit, but I was very hesitant to enter into the agency world. It was one of those things where if I was going to apply, I didn't want to take it lightly. And when I saw that they had won for Agency of the Year in the past, when I walked into their workspace just before the pandemic, it felt like a place where I could feel like I belonged. And, working there this past year showed me just how deserving they were of that accolade of Agency of the Year. I mean, we were able to, I feel like I've been able to speak freely. If I feel like, my values aren't being represented, I feel like if there's a client that I'm asked to work for, I can say, well, I don't really feel comfortable with that. Can I shift to another work stream? And it's located downtown, right by Millennium Park. So once we get out of this pandemic and I get to actually work in the office for the first time, I started remotely. I started during the pandemic. So looking forward to seeing that view of the park and to really getting into that collaborative space. Luckily, Zeno has really been intentional in trying to support their employees as much as possible as we all work remotely. So it's been a really awesome collaborative experience. But, again, looking forward to actually being in the agency office and working with my peers. But highly recommend anybody listening, if you're interested in working in agency life, Zeno Group is always on the lookout for talent. We have a number of job openings open right now. So definitely look into us. I think you'll be impressed, and I think you'll like what you see.
Awesome. Well, you are very knowledgeable, very passionate, and have a lot of experience. So if you had students like me who are about to graduate, or students freshman year deciding what they want to do, any advice, what would you give?
You broke up a little bit there. Do you mind repeating the question?
What advice do you have for students who are graduating or just starting out their college career?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece of advice I got, my heart is in nonprofit world. And in the nonprofit world, my passions are very much with volunteering. I think a lot of that got developed when I was a community service scholar at DePaul in my undergrad. And I kept that going after I graduated. And as I got deeper into my professional career, I realized that the nonprofit world is amazing. People with some of the best hearts work there, but the skill set isn't always present. And I think a lot of people go into the nonprofit world thinking, I'm gonna make a difference at a high level, and again, sometimes that skill set just isn't there. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you're hesitant about the agency life because you feel like maybe you're selling your soul by doing so, give this a thought. Working in a nonprofit, again, good people, skill set isn't always there. If you really want to make your nonprofit successful, why not get that experience? Why not learn how to swim by jumping in the deep end, gaining that experience at an agency level? That way, once you feel comfortable enough, you have the right toolkit to really help whoever you're working for exceed or meet their goals, jump into the agency life. Take as many notes, take as much knowledge as possible as you can. And when you feel like you're ready, jump ship, go to a nonprofit. And that way you're coming in with the wealth of experience working with companies that have been around for years. have had all different types of success. Now you can take all of that knowledge, come into a nonprofit and apply it and help a nonprofit be just as successful as some of the companies that we see traded on Wall Street.
That's really nice and speaks to just following your dreams and getting that experience. Oh, I really great. Appreciate that.
And I should say too, like, even though I work for an agency life, again, like part-time, I also work as the director of communications for the first Ward Alderman, Daniel Spata. So I still get to do my public service. I get to have my cake and eat it too. And of course, the end goal is always to get it back into the nonprofit world. So the advice I'm sharing on this call right now is the advice that I'm taking myself. So I wouldn't advise anybody to do anything I wasn't willing to or haven't done myself.
Awesome. Really practicing what you preach.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, those are all the questions that I have for you today. I want to thank you again so much for being a part of this. This was a really great conversation.
Cool. Oh, did you want to talk about the podcast at all?
I mean, if you want to throw it in right now, we're running out of time a little bit, but if you want to add a bit about your podcast, yeah, you can.
I mean, everybody talks about having a podcast, so I won't give you the whole spiel, but super quickly, this actually came out of the PRAD program. The PRAD program birthed this. So we had to put together our portfolios to end our time with the PRAD program in order to graduate. So I wanted to do something that had a bit more longevity, that was close to my heart beyond PRAD. So I partnered with the Puerto Rican Cultural Center here in Chicago on Paseo Boricua to develop a podcast that essentially highlights stories by, from, and about the Puerto Rican community. And these are stories that aren't traditionally given the attention they deserve by traditional media. So we have a website, we release episodes every week, and we have people on from elected officials from the federal, state, local level, artists, authors, healthcare workers, even the first person that got a vaccination here in Chicago, Dr. Marina Del Rio. So we get some big names, some notable names here at the local level, but also journalists, educators, YouTube stars. If you want to learn more about that, just go to paseomedia.org. And also it's Paseo Podcast on all major social media channels. And we actually are growing our base to have our team to have more volunteers on it. Funny enough, all those volunteers, DePaul alums. Go figure, right? So definitely check out. Yeah. The Blue Demons roll deep. So so that's the shtick on the podcast.
Well, great. Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing work that you're doing and sharing those stories of the community that you are a part of. And that's really admirable. So awesome work on that podcast. And to know that it came from the PRAD program is just an extra too.
Yeah. I love all the connections. So thanks for having me on again, Alexa. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. I really appreciate you being on the show. And for everybody at home, make sure to stay tuned for future episodes. Thank you.